Hi, my name is Nicole Check. I'm one of the editors for the Pflaum Gospel Weeklies, and I'm going to take you through the lessons for Unit 2 for Venture. They begin on November 15th, 2020, the 33rd Sunday in Ordinary Time, and the 8 lessons take us through to the Baptism of the Lord on January 10th of 2021. And first, I'm just going to go through a few notes, and then we'll go lesson by lesson. So I want to start first with a note about your prayer space. If you're just beginning to meet with your students in person now, or if you're teaching at home, it's important to have a prayer space dedicated for the gathering and closing prayer and for proclaiming the gospel each week. It can be simple. Gather a Bible, a candle with a lighter or matches, a cross or crucifix, and a small cloth in that Sunday's liturgical color. I'm going to scroll just a little bit down to the bottom of the page here. You can bring this down a little bit. There we go. If you see on the bottom here, this colored band corresponds with the liturgical color for that Sunday. And you're going to notice in Unit 2 that we're going to be doing a lot of liturgical color changes. And that's important to take that just moment of time and point that out to your students. So we are still in ordinary time. A piece of colored felt works well for the purpose of your prayer space. Give the children the responsibility to set it up. Like I said, there's a number of color changes, and these are teachable moments for your students. What does it mean when we're green? What does it mean when we go to gold or white, violet, and rose? And then again, when we return to gold or white with the baptism of the Lord. Another thing that I just want to prep you on is that Advent begins in this unit on November 29th. And since this is the lesson that's immediately following Thanksgiving in the United States, this is just a heads up that you're going to need to have a pre-made wreath form or the materials to create one. And we encourage you to incorporate the lighting of the Advent wreath as a part of your gathering and closing prayer rituals. So before you begin, we're right here. This is your covered lesson. This should be the cover of your 8 lesson nest. So you've got your Venture student lessons, and then we'll click through. And then your Catechism Handbook. I will probably heretofore refer to it as the WCBT, which stands for What the Church Believes and Teaches. So that's just a little acronym that we use. I'd encourage you either to have a copy of the teaching guide, which you should have in a printed format, or it's also available on our website, which is gospelweeklies.com. So you'll either have this teaching guide that's used by catechists and teachers in the classroom, or if you're a parent teaching, we also this year have parent teaching pages, which are a 2-page guide that that kind of is it's a boiled down version of our teaching guide, and it has like all the lesson answers, the to puzzles, to questions. It really should take you through everything that you'd need to know. And again, it also just has this little checklist. So if you don't teach the lesson all in one sitting, that you can come back and you won't go over things necessarily that you've already done, because we understand that you probably have a lot of classes to manage and perhaps more than one student to go through with lessons. So we want to make this as simple as possible. Again, this is the 2nd page, and this will take you through your whole lesson. All right. Just a couple more notes. When you're going through the lessons, I encourage you to look at the QR codes and install a QR reader on your smartphone if you don't already have one. And if you're not familiar with it, ask one of your students. I am sure they can help you with installing a QR reader app on your phone. And you just tap on it, and then you hover over the QR code, and it will direct you to the website where there are videos and prayers, different things that will enhance the lesson. They're not essential to teaching the lesson, but like I said, will enhance the experience. It could also, some of them are linked to directions assembly directions for projects, and they will take you directly to the lesson update page at gospelweeklies.com. And those lesson updates, again, include assembly directions, but they also indicate if we've made an error in the lesson, we'll post that update there, and it's by level and by week in English and in Spanish. Another thing I want to point out, and I'll note them as we go through the lessons, in every lesson we have a Eucharist quote. And this is just to encourage appreciation and understanding for the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. Also, as always, we have in both Venture and Visions in these levels, the With My Family and Friends box, which includes a weekly prayer, a question, and an action related to the gospel. If you teach or have taught any of the younger levels in the Gospel Weeklies, you'll recognize that as the family corner. And let's see, a few other notes. We always have online seasonal activities that are free to download and print for your students. Catholic backgrounds, saints and feast features, prayers, etc. And just a final note before we start to go through the lessons, you can always contact us, any of the editors, at editor@pflaum.com if you have, again, if you're identifying errors or if you have questions. Also, if you have story ideas, things that are going on in your community or in your classroom or parish, we would encourage you to share those with us. This is how we get some of our story and article ideas. So let's start with the first lesson, which is November 15th, 2020, the 33rd Sunday in Ordinary Time. The theme of this lesson is God is generous. And let's look at this cover activity here. What are your top talents? I want to note that some kids get a little stymied, I guess, when they start identifying their talents, because if they're not the smartest kid in the class or the fastest kid in their grade, that they feel like may perhaps feel as though that they don't really have talents. And note that these don't have to be huge or noteworthy. It can be good that I am good at making grilled cheese when my parents can't think of a dinner idea. They can be quote unquote ordinary gifts that are shared in thoughtful ways. Kindness is a gift and kindness is a talent. Being able to bring friends together are a talent, and give them time to work through this page. Let's see, let's go to the next page. All right, just some prep notes. There's no particular prep. Remember a rubber ball for your prayer. And remember that you can always save time, if necessary, by pre-reading the story. You should always pre-read the story anyway, if you have that extra time. But you can also maybe summarize the first part of the story, and then maybe the second page. Then you can invite students, volunteers, of course, to take a paragraph or two at a time. And that works for all of the stories and articles. I'm going to go back just one quick second. The story in this lesson is about taking a risk to try, and about failing and then trying again until we find a place that we can succeed and use our talents. And just an emphasis then and a transition into the gospel that God wants us to find and use our talents. Excuse me. The Sunday gospel for this week, let's go to that, is the servant who did not use a talent. Okay. The idea that we must use our talents and we cannot hide them out of fear or insecurity or perhaps even indifference. I want to note here too, if you're new to the weeklies, this highlighted word right here, or 3 words in this case, are our Catholic faith word of the week. Every lesson in the weeklies either has a word of the week or in the older levels, a Catholic faith word. And when you encounter this highlighted text, I would encourage you then to find where the definition is. And it's usually on that same spread. If you opened up 4 and 5, you'd see them together. Excuse me. And so then when you encounter that in that faith word in the text, to go ahead, read that definition so that the students understand that word in context. All right, let's go back. So yes, take turns. Volunteers going ahead to read that gospel. Then the connecting gospel and doctrine. Again, if you're new to the program, this goes into the text is typically based on part of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Here you see it is number 934 that connects to that gospel reading for that week, for that Sunday rather. Then I want to note right here, this is your Catechism Handbook. This would be the opportunity where you would just kind of on the desk, just slide the lesson up and open up that handbook and turn to page 51. In your, whether it's your parent teaching pages or it is in your teaching guide, there will be like a mini lesson within a lesson. It's always in a gold box. And it will explain step by step, you know, reading paragraph 1, paragraph 2, the questions you would ask in that section. So then when you're finished with the WCBT portion, that catechism portion of the lesson, then you would turn to page 5. And these things are all kind of strung together so that you, even if you don't teach it all in one sitting, you are almost always going to teach page 1 to page 8 in order. And all of these things kind of string together. So this is the Our Catholic Faith feature, almost always on page 5. It will either be, it's usually something that's highlighted or highlights something related to the Mass or to one of the Sunday readings. It's often something related to Scripture and Bible history. This week, for example, it features the first and second readings. In the case of the first reading, we explain that this is another look at how a person might use his or her talents. It's a wife in particular, but that this message is meant for all of us. All right, let's turn to our next page. Living the Gospel is typically on pages 6 and 7, and this is an application, a further application of the gospel message in real life, or an application to the students' lives rather. So some people have a talent for helping in challenging situations. This is a gift. You can have the children work individually, in pairs, or all together. Just make sure that it's an atmosphere where all the students can feel comfortable sharing their ideas. So you go through, identify the problem, answer each of the questions. And I would encourage you to just mix it up in terms of individual work. And of course, it will be primarily individual work if you're working at home. But take a role if you're working with your own child. You know, try to be that other student and work things out in partners. Let's turn to, let's go to the Saints page. Now, this can be used if you're in the classroom. It can be used as a pacing activity. If the students, for example, have finished the Living the Gospel activity early and are waiting for something to do, you could give that to them as something they can read while they're waiting. And then, or you can send it home, or you can read it together and ask some questions about that saint. I wanted to indicate here too in this lower right-hand corner that this is an example of our weekly Eucharist quote. All right. Okay, let's go on to our second lesson. All right. All right, now we're on the second lesson for Unit 2. This is November 22nd, the Solemnity of Christ the King. Let the students know that this is the last week in the liturgical year. Don't confuse them that it's not the last week of their venture year, but in the church, this is the final week of our church year. And we'll begin a new church year next week with the first Sunday of Advent. The theme for this lesson is that we know Christ's followers by their deeds. That is love of neighbor, works of mercy. So an activity prep, just a heads up, you're going to need some game pieces for the Works of Mercy game. Let's quick flip to that. I apologize. We're going to look and see if we need dice here. No, it looks like you just need coins. Yep, so heads and tails. So not just game pieces, they need to be coins. So let's go back to the cover. All right, so again, as the students come into your class or as you're sitting down with your own child, have them go through and answer some of these questions. This will just start priming the pump for a discussion about the works of mercy. All right. So this is a real life story about some students in New York who opted to do the works of mercy actually during the weeks of Lent. So it's a little out of season here as we're looking to go into Advent, but the same idea. This is something that you could do for Advent or plan ahead for Lent in 2021. All right, so again, taking turns, reading the story. Make sure that you take the opportunity to do the think questions. All right, and let's turn to the gospel for this week. And the works of mercy. This is our guide for how we treat one another. Pretty self-explanatory. Let's go to the WCBT. We focus mostly on the corporal works of mercy. We add here the spiritual works of mercy. So we're just kind of fleshing that out for the students. All right, let's go to our next lesson. Our next page rather, and talk a little bit more in the Our Catholic Faith feature an application of the gospel. When did we help? How can we serve? Again, the Catholic Faith word this week, and it's right on that page. Here we gave a little pronunciation. Just a tip in general, some words that you're very familiar with are beyond the reading level of a standard venture student. Here's a perfect example. By reading that word aloud will just make everyone more comfortable and emphasize that and help them roll these words into their Catholic faith vocabulary. All right, let us take an opportunity to review all of these examples of these works of mercy, and those continue into our next activity. This is kind of a game activity. You'll see here that it actually has a game board, but let's flip back here because why don't you go ahead and review these examples first before diving into the game. Pretty self-explanatory. Okay. The page 8 in Venture and in Visions, we try to rotate it between the Saints comics or a prayer service or an example of a contemporary Catholic leader. And for example, this one is, it refers to Christ the King and what kind of leaders we should be, talking about humility and sound leadership. And then there's an example of, or a little explanation of what it means to be a servant leader, and then a prayer service. Oh, this is one thing I wanted to note too. I mentioned the QR codes in the beginning. This is a consistent QR code in the With My Family and Friends box, and it will link you to parent and family resources. So if you hover with your QR reader over that, it'll take you to it directly on our website. Otherwise, you can go to gospelweeklies.com/family. All right, we're moving right along. Right here, you want to take a note that we have changed liturgical colors, we have changed liturgical seasons, and we are in a new year. Happy New Year, first Sunday of Advent. If you can do this, change out the liturgical color, piece of felt, cloth, whatever you're using in your prayer space. Again, if you've remembered after Thanksgiving to make sure to have your Advent wreath set up in your prayer space, and off we go. All right, this is the third lesson, lesson 11 for the year, November 29th. The theme is God Cares for Us. The cover, we're planning for Advent. This season can be overlooked in favor of Christmas, but we need to note the importance of Advent as a season on its own and how it should be a season of preparation, not just busyness. the prayer with the Advent wreath, either create one together or bring one that's ready made and incorporate that as many times as you can in your lesson, the opening prayer and the gathering prayer rather, and the closing prayer. And kind of survey the students, see if they're using an Advent wreath at home with their families. The story prep, let's go on to our next page here. This is a play. One note about a play, you do not have to have the pressure of props and costuming. If you have a class that really enjoys that, definitely encourage that. Plan a week in advance and see if they want to bring in some costuming, some simple props, but please don't let that intimidate you. This can actually be done as a very standard table read, similar, to how you do proclaiming the gospel or how you take turns reading any story or article. So let your students and your time be your guide with how involved you might get with props and whether you include them at all. Let's see. Advent is a time of Old Testament prophets and stories. This story in the lesson is a play that imagines 3 generations of a family away from their homeland during the Babylonian exile. So, all right. Just that note about props. Okay, so this is a long one. Take some time with the think questions. And pause now and again during the story too to see if the kids are following along or if they have any questions. The gospel, this is a message of preparation and being ready. We are preparing for Jesus' second coming. This can be a little confusing for kids. We're talking about Jesus' first coming at his nativity, but we're also talking about with the message at the end of the liturgical year, we're also talking about the end times and Jesus' second coming. So try to make sure that you're keeping those clear and separate for the students. Doctrine here, very important. We have a message about the mystery of the Incarnation. And, these are ideas where we're planting seeds about some of these big ideas. So make sure to spend the time reading that carefully, but we don't expect full understanding. That's something that comes over time. Let's go to the WCBT. Again, we're marking the new liturgical year. We're going to turn in the handbook to follow the liturgical calendar and identify some of the feast days and saints days in the church. Not all of them, just a few highlights. All right. Our Catholic faith. This is a focus on the first reading from Isaiah. Again, more connection to the idea of exile from the story for this week. All right, we have a prayer service. This is one of those lessons where we go a little bit out of order. So I'm going to scoot over this prayer service. This will be very familiar, an Advent calendar. We want to introduce this, ask the students again, survey them, see if they're using an Advent calendar or have any traditions like that in their home. We have that, St. Jane Frances de Chantal, and take some time with that, or again, send it home. Maybe the students actually, with some of these saints features, may have been named for one of these saints, and give them the opportunity to share that story. I'm going to flip back a couple here. We want to conclude with this Advent prayer service. So, all right, let's move on to lesson 12, the 4th lesson in the unit, December 6, 2020, the second Sunday of Advent. Obviously, we're still in that violet or purple time. This lesson focus is Jesus calls us to change. Activity prep, there's no special preparation, but for the lesson, make sure to have Bibles on hand to look up the scripture on the cover. Also note lighting 2 candles as a part of your regular prayer ritual. Let's go on to the story. All right, this fiction story. This lesson focuses on sin and forgiveness. Advent continues, and it's a time to prepare our hearts. And part of that is admitting sin and starting on better paths, asking for forgiveness and then starting out on a better path. The gospel for this lesson then is John the Baptist prepares Jesus' way. John the Baptist describes those better paths in Sunday's gospel. He tells his followers to make straight a highway for God. And the doctrine down here, keep talking about those straight paths. It continues this gospel message that our path is our relationship with God. We receive God's grace at baptism, but we must continue to fix and repair that relationship with him and with others with whom that we may have sinned against. WCBT is an introduction to sin. The students have probably, obviously with the, if they've received the sacrament of penance and reconciliation, that they have familiarity with sin. But in case you have students who haven't received that sacrament and they're new to this concept, to introduce sin as a choice to turn away from God or actions. So turn to page 31 in the What the Church Believes and Teaches Handbook. This will give a brief introduction to sin and then a description of mortal and venial sins, compare and contrast. Okay, let's go on to our Catholic faith feature and more. This is a deeper dive into sin separating us from God, identifying right actions and wrong actions. Okay, let's go on to our Living the Gospel feature, an application of the gospel. This is an activity that works on building relationships. Students will first identify problems and solutions and then select those solutions that would best restore good relationships. All right, let's go on to, this is St. Juan Diego. His feast day is this Wednesday, December 9th. Note on this page, the With My Family and Friends box. Again, encourage your children to share this part of the lesson with their families. Remind the children of the Solemnity of the Immaculate Conception, which we celebrate as a holy day of obligation this week on Tuesday, December 8th. And remind the students that this feast celebrates Mary's birth and life lived free from sin. All right, let's go on to the third Sunday in Advent. Note with the students the change to the rose-colored liturgical color. In some parishes, they remain with the violet, but perhaps the priest will to switch to rose-colored vestments. And note that that change is in honor of Gaudete Sunday, which also means rejoice, that we're rejoicing that we are so near to the birth of Jesus at Christmas. All right, the theme for this lesson is that Jesus calls forth the best in us. Prep, if you choose to make the O antiphon mobile, let's go to that page quickly. Sorry for clicking through. If you're on this page, we, in the church, as a part of the Liturgy of the Hours, we pray the O antiphons every day, the December 17th through the 23rd. And you have the option to make this mobile, that's down here in the lower right. It's not necessary that you complete the project in this way. However, if you do, you're going to need these materials, and you may want to prep a sample for the students. All right. Okay, let's go back. All right, so we're having a discussion in this lesson. Oh, I'm going to take a couple notes too, additional prep notes. Let's see, the story in this week's lesson may be performed as a play. Again, don't be overwhelmed by props or costuming. It's just as easily read as you read all adventure stories by taking turns and through dramatic reading. We've noted the cover activity. All right, let's go on to that story. Why the Bells Rang, kind of a folk tale and Christmas play. This story is about gifts. But let's talk about the most important gift at Christmas, the gift of God's Son, Jesus. This is a continuation of that cover activity in which we are discussing the best present that they've ever received. And we don't always do this. This is a feature that's called a kid talk, a student response feature. Give the students the opportunity to read through some of these or read them aloud together, and then to respond and share themselves with the best gift that they have received. And it could be a material gift, but I think that these students' responses will kind of prompt a broader understanding of what it means to receive a gift. All right, so we've got the story. And again, make sure that you spend a little time with the think questions, because these think questions are your bridge into discussing the gospel. All right. Gospel this week is, who is John the Baptist? And is he the Messiah? Well, no. And he's again in that idea of preparing in Advent, that he is preparing all of these people for the arrival of Jesus. In the Doctrine, we do a little discussing. The students will all accept Jesus as he is, as the Messiah, but the people who had been waiting for Jesus, this is not who they were expecting. They were expecting like a warrior king, somebody who would defend them and protect them against the people who had kept them in captivity and persecuted them. So just a little discussion about that. It'll continue some of the discussion that you had a few weeks earlier now, 3 weeks earlier during the Solemnity of Christ the King, but just a further discussion of what makes a good leader, what qualities would you hope to have in someone who is your leader. And the WCBT is more of a continuation, explains the importance of the Messiah in the Old Testament and the significance of the names of Jesus, which we'll talk about a little bit more with that O antiphon activity. All right. This feature is about the first and second readings, and the first is in Isaiah and the second in Luke, which is the Magnificat, Mary's joyful prayer of praise for God. All right, and again, let's go on. The puzzle can be done in class, again, as a pacing activity. Use the WCBT, but most of this is going to be pretty basic information about Christmas that they would already be familiar with, or have them work in pairs so they can help each other out if they get stuck. And again, the O antiphon activity. And I just wanted to show you that this is just the back of it. After you assemble this in a mobile, celebrate the Advent prayer together as your closing prayer. All right, let's go on to the fourth Sunday of Advent. And I want to make a note here. First of all, the theme of this lesson is Mary says yes to God, and the significance of her yes to being the mother of God. The activity prep here, there's no real project or story prep, but pay attention if you're meeting together at your parish or school. Just pay attention to the calendar. If this is the last time you'll be meeting before a holiday break, pay attention to when your class resumes, because you may need to send home your Christmas and Epiphany lesson, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next lesson. But just be aware, and you may even need to start that as early as the third Sunday of Advent, the previous lesson, depending on how your class meets. So just that note, story prep, introduce the story. On to the next one, sorry about that. It can be hard to wait for Christmas, certainly for young children who are excited about all the celebrations, and let's face it, the presents. There's a lot of exciting things going on. And so this is a very real life example of how you endure the long wait for Christmas. And let's see, and ask the children, what are they most looking forward to? Both gifts as well as This is an unusual year. They may not be able to meet with and be with some of the people that they would otherwise be with, but maybe there are other ways with Zoom calls or FaceTime or other video conferencing that they'll be able to be with family members and just talk a little bit about what they're most excited about. All right, so we've gone through the story. This is the story of the Annunciation, and make sure that you note that here in the Doctrine, what the significance of this special meeting between the angel and Mary. They can almost, if you ask the students, they can almost squeeze out the word announce from Annunciation. Let's see, this announcement is amazing, but so is Mary's response. And ask the students to kind of put themselves in Mary's place and what they think they might say. So let's see, and how do we say yes to God? That's a part of that doctrine discussion. The WCBT or handbook, the Catechism Handbook lesson, and we're going to do a little bit of talking about the major feasts of Mary, those 6 feasts. All right, again, in Advent, we do a lot of focus on Old Testament readings and about how Jesus is the fulfillment of so many things from the prophets. In this case, this is also to point out to the students that when they'll remind them that we've long discussed how long people waited for Jesus, and remind them that we'll hear about the house and lineage of David this week during the reading of the Nativity Gospel, and that this is that David. All right, living the gospel. Let's go on to the next one. This is a further explanation of the gospel story and the Annunciation, and that this is a very popular scene for artists. And this is a beautiful example of the Annunciation you can see on these 2 pages. And so there'll be just a little background about the art and how it was created. And then there's this little answer key down here that each of these kind of leaf shapes correspond with a question or activity that kind of points out a detail that you want the students to follow. I would say that this is a pretty advanced activity. We're kind of pushing our venture level students a little bit. So I would encourage either small groups or doing it all together in a large group. Your visual learners will very much connect with this lesson. Let's go on to our page 8. Oh, this is a fun one. Mary says, yet like Mary who says yes to God, all of these people said yes to God through a religious vocation, but they live that vocation in different ways. There's an example of Father Michael Jonkis, who wrote On Eagle's Wings. He also wrote Shelter Me, and because it's being this hymn is being shared royalty free for the first year, you can go ahead, hover over this, and listen to that being performed in a parish. Some of the other examples, watch a video together. I'd suggest maybe watching this one together in class and talking to the students about watching this video with Brother Guy, who talks about the Vatican Observatory, and he talks about faith and science. Sister Lisa, who is a football coach at the University of St. Scholastica in Duluth, Minnesota. And Sister Nancy Murray, who has some famous brothers, including actor Bill Murray. She is also an actress. I think that's everything that we want to talk about in this lesson. Okay, our next lesson is Christmas and Epiphany. And again, if your students are going to meet that week of Epiphany, don't send this lesson home. You're going to want to go, it can be taught over the course of 2 weeks, or it can be taught in one session. It's just, you'll go into certain things more in depth. But if you're sending it home, encourage the students to proclaim these Christmas and Epiphany Gospels with their families, have everyone take and play a role. The theme, of course, for this lesson is Jesus is born and God calls all people. All right. You'll note there's the activity in this lesson is to make a Christmas scene. So if you want to prep that ahead of, prep one for yourself if you like to color, or you can just, the paper is strong enough so that you can use these tabs and they'll stand up on their own. But for longevity, you may want to tape them around a small paper cup, a paper or plastic cup, and create a stable from a box. Get as elaborate or simple, remain as simple as you like. And then, so you'll have the Holy Family and the three magi or wise men. But it might be kind of fun if you can do it ahead in advance, and then they can have those characters or those figures during the play. That's one way to kind of act it out or enhance the telling. All right. Read aloud and stage the Christmas gospel, even if Christmas is past. When you meet, remind the children of that gold and white band and that Christmas is a season, not just a day. All right, let's go to, after you proclaim that gospel and read the think questions, this is another folk tale similar to the Christmas bells, or why the bells rang a couple of weeks ago. Okay, spend your time, try to pick out a new group of volunteer readers so that everyone has an opportunity to read who wants to during this lesson. The doctrine is about the nativity or birth of Jesus. We are at the halfway point with this lesson in the venture year. There are 32 lessons in total, and you are, well, actually you're just one lesson short of halfway, as we're on lesson 15 here. And to turn to page 58 and what the church believes and teaches, and review the Catholic vocabulary in the words to know section. Now, the students will not have directly had all of those words in their lessons, but just kind of get a feel for their familiarity with that, with those vocabulary words. Maybe indicate a little bit of what they remember and how far you may need to go. All right. Oh, just a note here for next week. If possible, encourage your children to learn about their own baptisms. Who are their godparents, where or when were they baptized, and even bring any special items. This especially works if you're doing an online class. They could bring their candle or their baptismal gown or pictures and show them. Share yours as well. And that would be fun for your students to see and to hear about your experience. All right, so. All right, so the final lesson in this unit, this is lesson 16 for the year, lesson 8 in this unit 2, and it takes us to January 10th, the baptism of the Lord. You'll see that indicated, by the liturgical color, which is either white or gold, but we opt to use gold. This white is just, well, white on the page, but indicate that, that the students will see either of those colors in the sanctuary. The theme of this lesson is Baptism Gives Us New Life. Activity prep during this week if you maybe forgot or haven't met, and you'll just be resuming now. If you communicate with your family, send an email, kind of reminding them that you're going to discuss baptism at this lesson. And also fill out this activity for yourself, if you remember all of these items. The article, not everyone becomes a Christian. Not everyone is baptized in infancy. Many are, but this is the story to follow 3 young Christians who are welcomed into the church. And we'll talk more about this process during Lent, but it's a good opportunity to talk about this process a little bit and introduce it at the baptism of the Lord. All right. And of course, the gospel for this Sunday is the baptism of Jesus by John the Baptist. the most important thing probably to note here is that in this gospel that we're introduced to the Holy Trinity. Father, Son, and Spirit are present at Jesus' baptism. And the Catholic faith word for this lesson is baptism. And to emphasize that we all become part of Jesus' family at our baptism. Just continuing more discussion about the sacrament of baptism, the things that we expect to see during the sacrament, the things that change inside a baptized person's heart, and how does baptism connect us to the Holy Trinity. So that plan to spend some time here with both this doctrine as well as this portion of the lesson in the Catechism Handbook. All right. This is the focus from the first reading from Isaiah for this week, the Song of the Servant of God. All right. In this gospel, we learn that God is well pleased with his son. The prophet Isaiah wrote about delight in the Lord, whom they call the servant of God. Note that the full text appears on the page, so additional student Bibles are not needed to complete this activity. All right, let's discuss a little bit more about what baptism means. And for students at this age, it is appropriate to start with an understanding they have, belonging to a family, belonging to a group. Excuse me. It continues this gospel lesson that baptism makes us a part of the Christian family. All right, and then there's a prayer service that you can either do as a part of this activity or you can use to conclude your lesson. Okay, oh, I also want to make one note about this. If you are meeting in class, some of these prayer services pre-COVID involved blessing each other, holding hands, exchanging a sign of peace. Wherever you see that, make appropriate adjustments. Obviously, that's something that you can continue to do if you're a parent teaching this lesson at home with everyone in your family unit. But obviously, if you're in a classroom, you'll need to make appropriate modifications for safety. Let's go on to the God Talk. I was just looking in my email box this morning, and some students have sent questions in, and that is great. We hope that that everyone who participates in this, who is interested in sending us questions, could send them to editor@pflaum.com, Pflaum.com, and we will do our best to answer them. One final thing too with that, remember that editor@pflaum.com for comments, questions, and also the lesson updates. If you have questions there, you can go to our Gospel Weeklies /lesson-updates, and that'll take you directly there. Also, the website is great if you have any questions, you didn't get a copy of your teaching guide, or you want to send a link to one of your families with the parent teaching pages. Those are all available on our website. Thank you, and God bless you in your ministry.
Hello, my name is Erica de Urquidi. I'm the Bilingual Editor for Pflaum, and I want to share with you really briefly our bilingual resources for Venture for Unit 2. First of all, we have available our Spanish teaching guide. This will not come with the rest of your bilingual lessons on the mail. You have to go to our website, and there under Spanish resources, Recursos en Español, you can download it and print it. Or if you prefer, you can contact our sales representative and ask them to send you a printed copy. On the cover of our teaching guide, you're gonna see this QR code. You can scan it with your cell phone, and it will take you directly to all our Spanish resources on our website. Here you're gonna find our assessments in Spanish, all the videos related to each lesson in Spanish. You're gonna find lesson updates that relate to each one of the lessons. Sometimes I'm gonna be, for example, here on the Advent lessons, I'm gonna be recommending some Spanish songs. And I'm gonna give you the link to those songs there in lesson resources. So you make sure you visit our website. You can use the QR code as I told you to do so. Also on our website, you're gonna find the parent teaching pages in Spanish. In case you're sending lessons home for your parents to teach, here you're gonna find the Spanish translation of the teaching pages so you can send them home. Also, this year we have a new activity book in Spanish. Here you're gonna find 32 activities related to the doctrine themes that we have linked to all the gospel messages of our 32 lessons. And also this year we have Spanish music available in Spanish. You're gonna see on the teaching guide, I suggest some songs from this website. It's nice to have it. You could purchase it on our website. If you don't have it, you can also use any songs that the children know. Again, this is our website, gospelweeklies.com. You click on the main menu on the browse button, and there you're gonna hit the button that says Recursos en Español. Here you're gonna find everything you need as a catechist in Spanish, and also family resources to send home in Spanish as well. This is all I have for Unit 2. If you have any questions, any concerns, please send me an email to editor@pflaum.com. Thank you and God bless you.